heat is still on.
Massive game.
New Zealand to win.
Great kick.
It's been a terrible year for the Wallabies.
We're missing an injection of life.
Stupid guys think they're so good.
Hello and welcome to RuggaMatrix International, episode 239. I'm your host, Jero Sen, and as always, I'm joined by this fella, Ben Kimber. G'day, Benny.
Jero, how are you, bud?
Very good to see you, mate. And it has been a wonderful weekend of rugby, some big scores.
Big news.
Yes, but big news too. Ben, as always, let's get straight to it. Your strike issue of the week.
Thanks, Jero. Well, I'm in a pretty good mood because I've come fresh off the back of watching an Australian team win a big game.
Well, breaking news.
And put 50 points on the board, which has been quite unusual.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it was at the expense of another Australian team, but, let's not quibble here. I did get out of the Tars yesterday. But one of the points out of that game, and I think is relevant for not just the Wallabies, but some conversations I want to have with you about the All Blacks as well. The strike issue of the week, those wonderful sponsors, Strike Car Cradles. The issue of the week for me is leadership in rugby. Now, specifically, the topic I want to kick off on leadership, I want to talk about Wayne Smith in a minute, leaving the AB setup. But first up, I'm going to follow in our old mate Greg Growden, who I used to work with at the Sydney Morning Herald when we were the rugby team there.
Geez, that's always disturbing, following Greg in.
Following Greg in. But Greg wrote a column on ESPN where he said, it's quite obvious after the weekend, even though Stephen Moore didn't play, that Hooper's got to be the Wallaby captain. Stephen Moore is not the man anymore. So a changing the guards, what Greg sees, and I'm going to back that. I think it is quite obvious for a number of reasons which we'll dig into, but it is quite obvious that I don't think Stephen Moore is the man to continue to lead the Wallabies. And I think Michael Hooper looks like pretty much the only choice right now. Thoughts?
So the captaincy obviously a big issue, and I agree that you need someone to lead from the front, and he's not going to get that through Stephen Moore anymore. But I don't think Michael Hooper, in my opinion, is the choice for captain, because it also takes into account what else happens off the field and those sort of leadership things. And just some of the comments out of South Africa this year. I mean, you remember the comment, Benny, about, we trained well off the field, on the paddock, but still got towelled up 2 games in South Africa. Just stupid little things like that. And I just think he just doesn't have the finesse that Australia needs as a captain. And I obviously don't have an answer for who should be captain, but I would like to see still our best fly half is Bernard Foley, and I'd throw him in there.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, it is a sad case of affairs for us in that we both said last year Checker on form probably deserved to lose the job, kept it because who else? I think Hooper is the choice a little bit because of who else. Now, that's not always a bad thing. We've seen guys who've stepped up in that. But I want to talk about Moore first. I don't think he's in our top 2 hookers right now. You've got to look at Tolu Latu, who I checked his stats today. He's only still a young fellow. He's only around 22, 23.
Yeah.
So he's got plenty of good rugby in front of him, and he's come on well the last couple of years. I think he's got to watch his discipline. But Tolu Latu's probably the form hooker for Australia. And your old mate Taaf's been going well as well for the Force in and out there, and they look like the top 2 at the moment. Moore struggles. Now, there's one point in particular about Moore, and I forgot to mention this last week because the Reds had the bye, but in the previous round, Reds-Rebels, tight game, Reds scraped home at the finish. But in the 55th minute of that game, if you still got the game on tape, go back and have a look. But Tom English made a big bust up field to get the Rebels back into it. Luke and Tui came across behind, but Will Miller scored the try for the Rebels. But the point to make on that is I went back and rewound and had a look at how that try was scored and that gap in the line that Tom English found. And Stephen Moore, to me, was responsible. He was dawdling across to close down the defensive line. There was a big hole there, he could see it, but he just didn't have the energy to get across and get in the spot and make sure the line was intact. Yeah. Luke and Tui tried to come across and cover for him, but English was away. So not only I think is Moore struggling a little bit, probably in just around the field play, he looks a bit tired. He doesn't look like he's as into the game as he has been. Now, whereas contrast that with Hooper in the Waratahs game, who was absolutely everywhere. The great thing about that Tars game was Hooper and Folau looked great.
Yeah.
Folau
had a couple of double touches, which is important, and he needs. Look, he's got to go and get the ball.
The energy looked back in his face too. He looked like he was actually into it. He looked a bit of the Walking Dead.
Is that because
previously.
He ran into you?
Could well be because he saw me out at the Hills training.
Yeah, that's right. You saw him, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, caught up with him. But Hooper was in defence, in attack, running lines. Now, he's not the hardest on the ball for a 7, so you've got to think about your balance in the team when you pick the team there, which is why actually Tolu Latu offers you something else in a Wallaby pack. But I think that Hooper is just his pure force and energy around the field were undeniable. And I think one of the things Growdy said too was he looks like he's getting better at managing the refs. So as opposed to just letting that that roll a bit, he looked like he was really getting into it. But apart from Hooper, you'd have to be hoping to pluck a John Eales from somewhere, you know? And I know that's a massive call, one of the greatest players we've ever seen.
Yeah.
But
no,
Eales, when he got picked for captain,
Yeah.
was not a unanimous pick.
He didn't want to be captain.
Didn't want to be captain. People didn't really think he was the man for the job.
Yeah.
And he turned himself into a fantastic leader.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, he was a reluctant captain, and there's no. I knew John really well. I worked with him as his media manager, and he grew into the role, which was great for Australian rugby. So, so the question here is, can Hooper really grow into it in a more mature way? You know, he's had his leadership responsibility so far, but to be a long-term Australian captain, I just think he needs to take a step back and realise the gravity of the role is more than just making, you know, glib comments and stuff that it doesn't really make sense in the light of the game as a whole. And what I mean by that is just junky footy talk. You know, he needs to sit back and maybe get some tuition about the other parts of the game, because it is such an important role for Australian rugby and it needs to be done right.
Yeah, but is his off-field behaviour, you know, a big part of the balance of getting it right? Because if he gets the team right and he's crappy at post-match interviews, I'd be okay with that. You know, if he's got the team in the right headspace, if he's leading the team in the right way, but he doesn't quite have the wherewithal to handle the wider press, you know, as well as other guys have, I'd actually be okay with that. And I think that's something you could grow into. But more important to me is, will he have the team with him and behind him? And we're not always seeing that with the Tars as well, right? We're not seeing the Tars with their heads up. I think some of that malaise of we're not feeling too good, we're not going too well, I think Hooper can show a bit of that in his body language and his face, and I don't know whether he lifts the team enough, but I think if he can manage to get himself in that right headspace, he is undeniably one of the first pick for Australia, and that's got to be a factor if you're going to replace Stephen Moore. The only other guy that I thought of, you know, that maybe you could bring along is an Adam Coleman type. He'd be a lead by example type captain, because he's come back and he has been, his work rate and his energy, he's fantastic, and he's another guy that I think will walk into the Wallabies lineup.
Couple of comments there on the big screen on our feedback coming through about Hooper in that regard.
Actually, I just saw Rob Martin said exactly what I just said. Whether he inspires the team is a question. Rob's one of the guys who posts fantastic diatribes onto our site.
Yeah, true.
Now, and the role on me for a discussion around leadership is, I think we saw some of it out of New Zealand this week. Wayne Smith stepping down as assistant coach. Smith, of course, absolutely amazing career, from being a player through to being All Blacks coach, through to being really a central figure, you'd have to say, in this dominant era of All Black rugby. Has called time, I think he's 60 or 59, and decided it's time to step down, spend some time with the family, etc. And that is a blow to New Zealand rugby, because if anything, what they've shown is the way that they can construct a team and the selfless nature. I kind of feel that's come a lot more from Smith than even Henry and Hansen. Smith, the guy who had the top job, lost it, came back with, you know, a lack of humility. Sorry, you know, a lack of arrogance, and step back in there to be an important cog in the wheel and to really drive an outcome. I feel like he's probably a bigger loss than Henry was, and perhaps Hansen.
Yeah.
They will see.
Yeah, I'll never forget. I was just a quick question. There was a couple of questions about the audio being low. Is it should be okay now? Let me know if it's still a problem, but I'll just boost it here.
It's the first time someone's told me my volume.
Yeah, yeah, I know. But I think in terms of Wayne Smith, I'll never forget when he walked down in 2000 in Wellington, and they thought they had the game. And then Ealesy kicked the winning penalty to win the Bledisloe Cup in 2000. And I think you know, as a coach, it was probably one of the most gut-wrenching moments for him, because he thought he had it in the bag. But yeah, he's a great guy, Wayne Smith, absolutely terrific guy. And you know, it's a guy who shows the sacrifice at that level. And I think in Australian rugby, Ewan McKenzie used to talk to me about this, and it was a really interesting thing, Ben, where he struggled to find assistant coaches that weren't just after his job, and they were there for the right reasons, to prepare players for their role. So whether it be backline play, forward play, or defence. And that, to me, is critical in getting everyone working together. That you know, you don't your ultimate goal shouldn't always be to be the head coach. It should be to make the All Blacks win or make the Wallabies win. And that's what I think that's great about New Zealand rugby. But, you know, we've got a few more comments here about Hooper as captain. And I know I'm sort of putting the cart before the horse with the attitude of the captain being spot on, being able to articulate himself in a way that just sells the game and also what the team has just done on the paddock. But it's really important in the Australian market that he does it right. So, yes, I think he's the best player in Australia, no doubt, and deserves to be picked every single time. But is he a standout captain for me? I say no.
Well, it's interesting because it might be, and this probably goes to the Smith conversation as well. Some guys just aren't...
Sounds better? Yeah, thank you. Thanks, guys.
Some guys just aren't best suited.
I love this live thing. Sorry, mate.
Some guys just aren't best suited in the top job. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some guys get that top job they might have wanted and realise, you know what, it's not for them. And it might be that they're best off in another role in the team, as, you know, an important role, but they're not the guy who should be right there in charge of whatever aspect of the game it is. I mean, if you get to our age, mate, you've had bosses in the past, you've had good bosses, people you like who weren't such a good boss. It's a real dynamic that has to come together. You know, and I look at that Wayne Smith and say, what a great guy he was to play that role. He did that one rung down, but hugely influential, and let Hansen and Henry take the limelight more. Hooper is the obvious choice for captain right now, but will he be that guy, or would he be better off behind a Pocock if he was around, or someone like that? Well, we'll have to wait and see. The last word on Smith for me, it was really interesting. Morgan Turanui, who is former Wallaby, good mate of ours, and the Rebels assistant coach, who quite publicly came out and gave the RU a touch-up last week about their treatment of the Rebels. But on Twitter, Morgan Turanui said about Wayne Smith, quite simply the best coach and one of the most outstanding human beings I've met. Good riddance. And
good riddance in a nice way.
And I thought, I thought that really summed it up. So there'll be lots of chat in New Zealand now about who's going to take over, whether Ian Foster will take more of a role. Joe Schmidt, whether they'll try and bring him back in some capacity. They've got plenty of options there, good solid coaches. Whereas to me, you contrast that again to the Wallabies, and Cheika's talking about Stephen Larkham taking over, whose coaching experience, with all due respect, is quite shallow.
Yeah,
it's quite shallow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Some more comments coming through in the chat room, or I'll call it the chat room, just like the old days. Rob Martin saying leaders are not made and are not the best players. So I think they can be made, and John Eales is a great example of a leader who was reluctant to be made. I know that quite intimately because I was there with him and I went through the whole process with him. So I feel honoured that I had that opportunity, but I did know a guy that really didn't want to be captain, and he was always reluctant to be singled out. And it is a big issue. The captain is the focal point for the team, like it or not. And if you have a good captain who can handle all the barbs off the field, I think Australia will go a long way to be successful. But look, it doesn't change the fact that he's got to still have the right to be in the team. There's nothing worse than having a captain in the team who doesn't deserve his place in the side, in his position.
And that's a conundrum for us, right? Yeah. How many of the guys are walk-up starts? Yeah. Not many. Not many. Hooper, Folau, yep. Stephen Moore, no.
Okay. Move on.
Let's talk about Super Rugby. Let's roll into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big round, 8 games. I watched a few of them, not all of them, so I'm going to talk about what I saw, watch some of the highlights. Kicking off, great event, the Chiefs Crusaders took it over to Fiji, and 17,000 fans.
It was fantastic.
Great advertisement for the game over there on the island, and a cracking match. Now, the Crusaders really shaping up as the dominant force this year, as tipped by yours truly.
No, jeez.
I'm not going to stop talking about that, am I, until they lose?
You're not.
But a cracking game. Chiefs scored 4 tries to 3, but the Crusaders just managed to turn the screws and build that second half and come home strongly. Richie Mo'unga clearly had a great game up against Aaron Cruden. So that's the kind of game that would make the All Black selectors feel pretty good about the fact that maybe, Cruden's going, but there are a few other guys around. Mo'unga really controlled that game well. Still got some question marks on his defence. And I think Cruden is, he's still a massive loss, but they would have certainly felt a bit better about that. The other guy I noticed as well was in the centres, Jack Goodhue. I thought he had a good game. Really quite the kind of game that shows that we said it last week. The Crusaders are getting back to the type of team that they always have been in their dominant eras. And 12 out of 12, they're now 11 points clear in the NZ conference, and they're 3 points clear of the Lions, which is really important. If they dropped a couple here or there and the Lions get that top spot, could be real trouble for the Kiwis trying to win this one, because the Lions aren't going away, but Crusaders keep it moving along.
Yeah, quick comment there about Crusaders would beat most international teams. I think they would actually.
Yeah.
But I was still excited about the Lions. I really enjoy the way they play. There were a couple, there's a comment also there about the officiating, and look, a couple of doubts there about one of the passes, particularly the key winning try, obviously. I actually didn't think it was too bad, and I agreed with the commentary team. It tended to float forward there for the Crusaders.
Can be a controversial rule, but I quite like it. As long as you can see that the intent was there and the ball did go backwards out of the hand, if it floats forward, I don't have a real problem with it.
Well,
it's not deliberate, right?
The ball's always going to move forward because it's going with you,
momentum.
momentum.
That's right.
So as long as the indication is to go back. Another comment too, Highlanders dark horse team. When we get to the Highlanders,
well, you can't be a real dark horse when you string of wins together like that.
I've got plenty to say about that, especially after they did the hard yards against the Bulls in the wet. We talked about that at length.
So moving through the games, not going to dig in them as much as we did last week, but I do want to pull some points out. Storm has managed to get some South African pride back on the agenda, taking out the Blues. That was a really costly loss for the Blues. If they had any hope, they're going to struggle with that. Point out of that game from me was man crush, a second man crush. All right, we talked about Matt Hodgson, how great he was, and the way he's standing up for the force.
There we go. Yeah.
Even Etzebeth. If he's not exactly what you expect a South African forward to be, I don't know what is. I loved it. He was in there at one point, absolutely stinking it up with the entire Blues team. He and Sonny Bill had hold of each other, but all you could see was Auckland Blues players. Not Auckland Blues. The Blues players around him.
Do you reckon he's seen a few Sonny Bill's fights?
I don't know if he has. Maybe he hasn't got a gut of some of the guys at Sonny Bill's fought.
That's what I mean. I think he had seen a few of the fights.
But Etzebeth, right in there, in everybody's face. And that was one of the hallmarks of South African rugby, where the Buckies Botha type, the guys who actually got in there and would never take a backward step to anyone and would push in their faces. Yeah, he got a yellow card, but love to see it, love to see him go hard. And to be frank, in that pack, that Stormers team has struggled at times. He's been the only guy keeping them in it a lot of the times. He has been massive, and I think he's going to be big in the international season as well.
Well, one of the things I've noticed through all the New Zealand sides of the weekend, Benny, is that they've just terrorised everyone in midfield. The midfield of the New Zealand sides is just incredible. Now, the question I want to pose to you is, are the Kiwis that good, or is it just too easy? Is the opposition up to it?
Yeah, and that is a really interesting question. We've said this before, and I think we called it false form a couple of weeks back, didn't we?
Yeah.
And it really sort of played out the last couple of weeks, particularly in some of those games where the scores blew out, where you saw the Highlanders against the Force, and to a certain extent the Waratahs over the Rebels, I'll put in the same bucket here, and also the Lions over the Bulls. Teams that aren't travelling particularly well, sometimes, but I've noticed that a lot of the tries that are constructed are fairly simple, right? They're basically just outflanking the defence. It's good quick hands at both directions, and by that time there's a bit of space on either flank and they're away. So they're making that room down the edges, which isn't so much the brilliant creation that might be needed, with a stronger team up against you. But look, I don't think it's too easy for these Kiwi teams. I think they're getting it right. They're playing great footy, but sometimes the opposition lets them down.
Well, I mean, look at the Cheetahs and the Hurricanes. What's your next game?
Cheetahs Hurricanes.
All right.
61 points to 7.
That game was just a joy to watch if you wanted to see outstanding, pulsating rugby. And just look at the midfield. And we'll talk about midfield. Yeah. Just look at the Canes midfield and tell me that wasn't one of the most unbelievable performances you've ever seen from a 12 and 13.
Yeah. Well, mate, Laumapi's been running over blokes all season. But outside him, Vince, I've forgotten his name, the 13 for the Canes, 3 tries. I think it's a record now for his tries in the season. I think it's 13, got Umarga's record. Fantastic effort. And those two guys, it was interesting because when Laumapi played against the Crusaders, didn't quite have the impact. Made a couple of good runs. Yeah. So definitely those guys are making hay against some of these teams like the Cheetahs and maybe the Force. Yeah. But those are the guys I'm saying you would not know if they're up to international level or not, because they can towel up some of these teams that might not be quite there. but they're going to have to do more when they step up the international level. Not to say they can't, but it can be false form.
Warwick Coe makes a good point there. It's
Vincent Arso.
is the ability to seamlessly transition from defence into attack that puts the Kiwi teams in a different league. That's absolutely 100%. And we talked about how the Australian teams have made a rod for their own back because of their defensive changes to take care of deficiencies there. So when they have to attack, a la Crusaders style, they aren't up to it. But a lot of those turnover bull tries by the Hurricanes were just unbelievable, just amazing. In fact, if you see, there was one try there, Ben. This is where we talk about maybe lazy players and players not prepared to commit. So while the Hurricane centres are just streeting down the field, there was 7, 8 and 9 all trailing within a few metres. That tells me that everyone's all in. Everyone's all in. They weren't just sitting back saying, "Go boys, score another one for the team." They were there wanting a piece of the action. So that to me is a great tip. I really want to see the Canes back there again. I know you're on the other boys, but I love them.
The Canes are in there, but I think, and I said you can't ignore the Highlanders either. When the Highlanders are
oh no, absolutely. I mean, the Highlanders, get to them as well. They're just fantastic. I mean,
but also it's not all Kiwis here
Chiefs
too.
too.
Let's not rule out the Lions though. Okay, the Lions are right up there on 51 points. Yes, they aren't playing the Kiwi sides, but that's not their fault. They're playing who they're playing. They're on 51 points, and at times they are playing excellent rugby. They play a really fast, physical game. They move the ball around and attack. I like the way they look, and they can still do something special. Smashing the Bulls. What's with the Bulls, mate? The Bulls, 10 years ago or so, they were a shambles and a joke, and they look like they're hitting there again.
Well, they had big leadership, didn't they? Yeah. They had great leadership when they were on the top of the game, and now they've just fallen apart. So, Ben, I reckon that the Lions, you're right, they're playing what's in front of them, but some of the stuff they've been doing has been fantastic. A couple other comments there about the pace of the game. Now, if you look at some of the, particularly, you haven't done the Force game yet, have you? No. But when you get to the Force game, you'll notice that the Highlanders, it was the pace of the game. So the pick and drive, so normally you want to get quick ball, but the pick and drive and the pick and go was so quick. The Force were just like boys playing against men.
Yeah, look, I feel a bit for the Force and the Rebels because I think it would be so hard to keep yourself up. And both of these teams on the weekend, the Rebels looked weary against the Tars. The Tars weren't exceptional, right? Just to cap those games, the Force lost 55-6 to the Highlanders. Yep. The Rebels lost 50-23 to the Waratahs. But to me, both the Rebels and the Force look like a long season. You know, when you see those teams, you just think they've been going a bit too long in the season. It looked to me like they just were a bridge too far. Yeah. They've had a few injuries. Like the Force have got a few blokes out. They had a whole line of blokes on the bench. And the Rebels lost a few. They lost Reece Hodge in the first few minutes with a concussion, a massive hit, a blow to the temple from Israel Folau, and it just looked like the hits keep coming. And I think those teams are better than that, and I think they hit a bit of a dip.
Yeah, and I mean the stats can be a bit deceiving. Like if you look at, I think the top offloading side is the Cheetahs. Yeah. Just half the time the Bulls are going the wrong team, but that's at least they're trying to play the game and force the issue. And they tried to force the issue a few times there, but obviously it went the other way and turned the ball over. Yeah. So I like the way they want to attack. But you're right, the Waratahs. I think good they got the win, but I wouldn't be be barracking too much or crowing too much about.
Expecting too much when they hit NZ.
Oh. Because when they play the Highlanders, whole different ball game.
So just to cap the rest of those scores, Sunwolves, Sharks, Sunwolves 17, Sharks 38. The Sunwolves actually look like they're improving, right? We're getting more out of them now than we thought. They were in that game until late few tries for the Sharks. And I hope the Sunwolves go well. If they're going to be committed to, let's commit to them and make sure they go ahead. Lions, Bulls, we mentioned 51-14. Kings, Brumbies 10-19. Kings were in front for I think 60 minutes of that game, and Brumbies scored a couple late, which hopefully gives them a bit of a push. And then the game I went to, Waratahs Rebels. Now, I just wanted to call out a couple of points out of those games for talking points.
Yep.
For those of you who did watch the Waratahs game,
you saw it live too?
I was there. Yeah, I was there at the game with my boy. Angus Gardner in the 18th minute, the Waratahs were getting smashed for the first 20 minutes. I think they gave away the first 8 penalties or something. But in the 18th minute, I was at the game, and you want a spectacle, right? You want things to keep going. I got a 7-year-old and an 11-year-old
Yeah.
sitting next to me who want to get involved in the game and enjoy it.
Well, you could create that yourself.
Want to sing a song or something? I don't know. But we're sitting there watching the game, and I had to go back and watch it on TV to hear what happened clearly. But Angus Gardner stood there for a while. He had a chat to Georgie Abe in the box.
Yeah.
It was when Dean Mum had his hand on the ball illegally, and the Rebels kicked him and struck him with his studs. And it went on for a good minute and a half. And we couldn't hear a damn thing. We didn't know what was going on. We sat there in the stands looking at each other. If you watch it on TV, Angus Gardner had a lovely old chat to George, and then he and Michael Hooper had a bit of a chat for a while, and it was just ridiculous. Make the call, move the game on, keep it going. We're there to enjoy a spectacle, not to watch you talk to a bloke in your earpiece and have a chat to the captain. So 8 penalties in a row, penalise them, get on with it, give them 2 seconds to sort themselves out. Don't get into these ongoing things. Now, I think Growdy said that looked like Hooper getting a handle on his captaincy because he's getting a handle on the ref. Whereas to me, it was just like, what the hell's going on?
Well, yeah, and Bernard Foley too got hit for a tap down. That he said, "Oh, let's go for the ball." Yeah. He was adamant.
Yeah,
most players always are. So there was a bit of chat going on there. But look, yeah, it was a better game. Israel against a better team. It certainly wouldn't have been the same result. But I was really impressed with Israel Folau getting involved again. He looked happy. It's good for the game. You know, if you want to do something crazy at left field, make him captain.
Ooh, it's a big call. He hasn't put himself forward as that kind of guy at any stage.
Well, I put it in the same category what the Reds did.
Yeah, Karevi. Yeah, okay. Interesting call. You never know, right? Yeah. Until a guy gets that responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we know he's going to get a start anyway. That's a good start for the
He's
Wallabies.
going to start.
Now, what I said about the Waratahs before too, I do agree with you. It was a big win, 50-23. It didn't have the hallmarks of a side that's going to do any damage, really, against the Kiwi sides. They still looked a bit frantic at times. They still looked a bit aimless in their kicking game at times. And what I said at the start of the season about the Waratahs, I think, rings true as well. Too many guys who've got to prove they're super players before we'll believe they can be anything like an international player. One guy that I think bucks that trend, so I think there's a few back rowers I've been throwing out there that, are basically middling. But Ned Hannigan, the 6 for the Waratahs, looks like he might have something.
Yeah.
And one of the things is, and I want to throw some kudos out to some of our viewers who were discussing this with me on either YouTube or Facebook or both, is off the ball work, right? We've talked about previous shows energy, and I think a great way to sum that up, we mentioned it previously, is off the ball work. Ned Hannigan was working off the ball. Now, I talked about Akira Ioane as being a bloke who's looking good the last few weeks. A couple of our Kiwi viewers touched me up and said, he is lazy off the ball and they will not pick him. And I think, you know what, I've watched him a bit since then, and I think they're probably right. He's a bit of a flat track bully, right? He's a bit of a weaker team, he's going to have a crack, but is he doing all the hard work behind the scenes? I don't think so. Ned Hannigan, though, I really liked the look of him for most of the game, and Dash, my 7-year-old son, told me number 6, Ned was the best player on the park, he thought. So there's a tip
He's
from
a good
Dash.
judge, eh?
And that off-the-ball energy really gets to that stuff we talk about with Eddie Jones, who says, I care about how long they take to get up off the ground when they make a hit or when they get hit. That's what he cares about. And that's right. How do they work in there? And that was what I was saying about Stephen Moore at the start. He's not doing that off-the-ball work. One other guy I mentioned last week to say keep an eye on, because I loved his pass, Meehan, the Rebels halfback, and I think he's got the best pass for number 9 in the game in Australia. He was horrendous in defence a couple of times. Yeah. There was a couple of times there when you said, the Canes were there and they were all trailing through looking for action and work. A couple of those Waratahs breaks and tries they came through on. Meehan coming across as the last man did the give up. Yeah. You never know what might happen.
Yeah.
Diving in there, get a hand around a leg, try to get a hand on the ball, something. Both times, players piling through, he gave it up. So I was not impressed.
Well, there you go. Nice, Benny.
Thanks, mate.
You got another game to go to?
No, I think that's it for the games. I think the only other,
can we just be a little bit? I've got about. I want to just tighten up the show a bit tonight, guys. We've got another early start tomorrow, but we've got another 15 minutes to go, Benny. Just on what the Waratahs can, because I think this is a really important game that will show up the Waratahs against the New Zealand teams when they play against the Highlanders. So when you saw what the Highlanders did on their road trip to South Africa, they go to Perth and they towel up the Force, and now they're home this week. It is going to be, I think, the game that just, if they wipe out Australian rugby, I guess it's a case of wiping out Australian rugby if they annihilate the Waratahs, because Waratahs should be in a good position now to take them on.
They should be, but look, it feels like they're going to lose by about 20-25.
Yeah.
You know, you just look, the form lines are pretty good. I said the Rebels looked a bit flat. The Waratahs had a couple of good players in Hooper and Folau and a couple of guys who did some good things, but they didn't look like a team that were in the kind of shape that was going to be any sort of contender. I think I said that. And if they head over there and get smashed, it's got to be season over. You know, the dream's almost dead already. And you've got to be thinking about how you can maybe protect those blokes who should be in the Wallabies side from getting injured for the rest of the year.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But I think that this is a massive game for them. So what about the Brumbies? You know, getting back in the winners' circle. It's not. Again, it's not one of those great results against lesser opposition, but at least, you know, that Australian conference is tightened up a little bit more.
Well, I think last week we said we want to see maybe, you know, to play their way back into form on defence.
Yeah.
I think the Brumbies have done a little bit of that. They've had a lot more integrity in their defensive line. So, you know, not getting smashed, it would be, you know, what they'd kind of expect now, because if they can at least hold the defensive line, they've been pretty ordinary at scoring points. They haven't been able to crack those defensive lines themselves. But at least if they can build their way into games and keep their defensive line intact, they should finish on top of the Australian Conference and make it into the finals.
And Rob Martin with another good comment there. We're still thinking that Super Rugby means nothing in the Rugby Championship, and I really think that is true, because you can't fit all those great New Zealand players into a run-on side, whereas when you condense it down, Australia can put together a pretty handy 15, and the bench as well. So it just means, though, that Cheika's got to have the right 15, and he's got to have tactics. We know he's poor when it comes to tactics.
Yeah.
He's not a tactical coach, so he needs to bring that into the realm. He is a great inspirational coach. The players have told me that repeatedly, but they don't rate him as far as a tactical coach. Do you agree, Ben Kimber?
Yep, I do, and we've said that, I think, in shows last year, that he's all about motivation as far as we can see, and when we see these teams get beaten, it's because they don't seem to have a plan B. So but he's going to have a massive motivation hill to climb. Like, does the Super Rugby affect the Rugby Championship? It shouldn't be an enormous factor, but it is a factor. And when you've got Australian teams that have been beaten pillar to post through the Super season, it is a challenge to get those guys out of that scene into the international scene and make them freshen up. And then, you know, to face up to, you know, a Kiwi side who touched them up last year, you know, potentially a couple of, you know, different tests to lead through to the Rugby Championship at least, the Fiji, Scotland, England, Italy period at first. They'll have the time to pull together as a team, you would think, against some of the teams that they should have the wood on, or if not a great game with, like Scotland.
Just seen the second or third comment in the comment section here, Benny, for Fisher as assistant coach. Now, you know I'm a massive fan of Laurie Fisher.
That's right, yeah.
He's an incredible rugby brain. Put his hand up in the UK when things didn't go well, but great forwards coach, just loves the game, and the guys really play for him. You know, you shouldn't have to want to play for someone, you should be motivated enough, but he'll certainly drag players along, but I'd love to see him there. And, you know, would Cheika bring him into the fold? I'm not quite sure, but, you know, I'd say yes.
You'd love to see him involved somewhere.
Oh,
you know,
he's too good of a rugby brain.
Again, maybe a great example of a guy who was not a head coach, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
He didn't quite get it right when he led the Brumbies, but I also think he doesn't seem like a guy with ego. I think he was looking to come back into some sort of a role at some point, but, you know, he doesn't look like a guy who would demand a head coach role. He's looked like a guy who's really got his head screwed on right and might be a good influence on players, you know, with his experience. He's
a great guy to. Les Kiss's name just brought up.
Yeah.
Who was that? Who
there
brought up?
Lorcan O'Reilly.
Yes. So.
Great shout, Lorcan.
I think he's actually. Les could be better than that.
Let's get him on the show. Let's get him back on the show.
Yeah, I better get him on. Yeah. Right. Les and I go back a long way, and he, I think, could go the next step now.
Yeah.
And be a head coach in Australia. But yeah, I'd love to see him back. So coaching-wise, we need the solution. But in New Zealand, obviously, things are going well. But I'm seeing a few comments that they need to be wary about what's happened to Australia. Could happen in New Zealand in a lesser way.
Well, I think it's started to happen, Giro. I don't think things are going that well. You missed the big game on the weekend, mate. The Sevens.
Oh, no.
The Sevens. New Zealand were right on top of Scotland. Scotland came over the top of them and put them out of the semis.
Oh, that's a game over. You better all go and start playing rugby league.
The fifth place playoff, Australia versus New Zealand in Sevens. Australia 40, New Zealand 7.
Yeah.
What about that? Unheard of. Massive win for the Australian Sevens team. And I tell you what, there's a couple of blokes in there that we should keep an eye on. I forgot, Mark Eller on Twitter named a guy who I forgot, but there's another guy called Peach who I think went well. A couple of good, solid boys there who looked really fit and fast and got into it. But that was a big, big win and a stunning 5th place. I think it was the best place in the tournament to pick up that time. Excellent.
Yeah, so can I just follow up? Yeah, the follow-up comment there about Les not doing a great deal at Ulster. He was a great assistant coach at Ireland. Worked with him very closely at the Waratahs. Exceptional coach there, Benny, and he gets players on board quickly, and he's a good wedge between the head coach and the players, and that you do need that dynamic in a team, because the head coach has to make the tough decisions, and players may not like him as a result, but they certainly need someone in between, and Les is good like that. Yeah. He's a guy that they respect enormously. So, yes, and done so much good stuff for Ireland in defence over the years.
Well, I think a lot of Kiwi viewers taking those Sevens comments pretty seriously there.
New Zealand Sevens straight out cheated. That's Sevens.
Oh, that's a reference to the 8 players on the field against Scotland, which they got penalised for.
Yeah,
that's fair enough.
Well, I thought it was 15s, so they actually ripped off. They didn't have enough on the field.
Well, it feels like about 18 on the park when we play them at Bledisloe time. Mate, I wanted to roll into a couple more things.
Yep. Let's wind it up.
All right. 3 things to talk about. Let's go Lions tour, just because there's a big bit of news out of the Lions tour.
Oh yeah. One of the players.
Dylan Hartley almost came back in, didn't quite get there, which I wasn't worried about. But Billy Vunipola out of the Lions, smashing number 8. If you're a regular viewer of this program, you know I'm an enormous Billy fan. I think he's fantastic, and I think he's a big blow. I was calling for him to be in the side. I named him in my Lions 15. And there'll be some despair, I think, up north about losing him, but because they haven't got a guy like him.
Well, Brian O'Driscoll tweeted about it, and it was almost like the end of the world.
Yeah.
What a great player he is too, Ben. Brian O'Driscoll.
The thing about,
that's for you, Darren Ormsby.
The thing about,
I saw join the chat room.
The thing about Billy, right, is there are not lots, but there's other guys who can go in at number 8 and play a great game at a number 8, right? We've seen that across the 6 nations. But Billy Vunipola is a different type of player. There aren't many guys who can genuinely bend any defensive line, and I mean any.
Well, he doesn't just bend it; he destroys it.
Exactly right.
Picks it up and takes it with him.
Teams can be having a stonkingly good, and there's a phrase I might always use.
Yeah, you love it.
A great defensive game, but a guy like Billy will always get you meters, and that is so valuable. And here's a little bit of a segue into a guy that I put in that camp. Will Skelton's leaving Australian rugby, and there are those who are saying, not such a big loss, doesn't always deliver. But I tell you what, for a 20, 30-minute end of the game, when you need to change it up, you put Will Skelton on, you are going to get meters, because that is just so big and strong, and he just falls over guys, and you were on the front foot. Billy does that better than Skelton, clearly. But the point being, there are some guys that it's not coachable, they are just wrecking balls. And Billy
Kevin Gibbs said, no, Darren, please. Yes, we agree. Billy is a monster. I think I'm just disappointed because I wanted to see him play the All Blacks, and it would have been a great contest because that's what we want to see. Yeah. So, and he is a monster, and
those
what
guys
a shame.
Well, those guys are the more physical presence too. You see them like Will Skelton, Billy, when they get in the middle of a maul, they peel a maul like an onion because they just seem to have a bit more power than everyone else. Yeah. So they're big around the park, but they also make, they can stop rolling mauls and things like that. I find it.
And guys pick up the ball in one hand, and it's like a little apple. Yeah. It's pretty impressive. So New Zealand's got its fair share of players there, but Skelton's nowhere near.
Oh, no, I said that. But
near, mate.
What I mean is they bring something that other players can't.
No,
he doesn't bring to the same degree as Billy, but you can't just put another bloke in.
He's a good ball player.
Who gives you that? Yeah.
Which Ewan McKenzie had him doing. Yeah. And then what happened after that?
Yeah.
No, seriously, what happened?
Well, I think they told him to toughen up, right? They told him to try and play a harder game, and it took it out of his game a bit.
Yeah. But this is what I can't stand. Coaches have no idea what they're doing because they try and fashion a bloke into what they think they should be, rather than using them what brought them to their attention in the first place. And it's a big man with great ball playing capabilities, and he can take a few people with him. So, remember the big bus?
Yes, yeah.
For Eastwood?
Yeah, Christian Lalafard?
No. Cassiano. Was it Cassiano?
No, you're thinking of the league.
Come on, help me out. Clubland, the big bus.
You get a bloke who weighs 145 kilos running in a line, you can do all right.
Yeah, that's it. But,
Another question, just a question for the guys out there too, guys and girls. I haven't seen any of the premiership games that have led up to the Lions team getting together. So if you've seen some good performances, and by my reading of the reports out of the UK, they feel like there's been a quality as the premierships play out over there, and so probably some games that have put the Lions guys in good shape and in good headspace as they come into camp. But if you've seen or watched any of those games and you've got any call-outs, post them.
Yeah, comments about Coles as well for New Zealand.
Yeah.
And
would be a big loss.
Yeah. So I think, Benny, that's about it for the program. It's been a really good, sorry about the audio at the start. We'll fix that on the show when it gets posted. Now, some housekeeping stuff I've got to do right now. So after setting up the live stuff, we have now backdated. It's cost me a fortune in connectivity, but I've now backdated to iTunes and podcatchers, all the episodes up till this week, so you can download them if it's audio only from iTunes or from your favourite podcatcher. The HD version of the show, which is the best quality, you'll see from iTunes because it's a direct download, so you can get that there, no problems. But we're going to kill off the SD feed, and I'll put a little note on that shortly, because we just don't see any point of doing SD in this time of 4K screens like this behind us. So it'll just be the on the iTunes feed, you'll get the high definition 1080p feed and the audio feed as well. So they're all up to date. So we're all ready to rock and roll there. We will also be going to live stream on YouTube as well simultaneously. So you guys over on YouTube who don't have Facebook accounts, you'll be able to see us in a couple of weeks' time. So that will be pretty exciting when we get to do that. I just have to do a bit of rigging and buy some more gear. So we've got all that. The other thing too is we won't be here on Monday next week. I'm going to London on Sunday, and with some tech and cricket.
So we're missing a show.
So we won't have a show next week. But for God's sake, Ben, you have a column slot ready to go on the website. Where is it? You better do it for everyone this week.
Well, you know, I'm going to have to, because I didn't get to Checker Watch. Checker Watch. I didn't get to do Checker Watch, so I've still got that up my sleeve. Or I can do it now if you
do
like.
it. Checker Watch.
Checker Watch.
Hold on. Checker Watch.
Quick Checker Watch.
I'll do some graphics for that.
Well, I'm not going to get stuck into him, because he was quoted last week as saying maybe no teams would go out of the Australian Conference, which threw another spanner in the wheels for Australian rugby. I'm like, can they get on the same page, these ARU types? No wonder there's been a vote of no confidence from the Rupa, and they're going to have a meeting this week. But what I'm going to say was, I saw on Twitter he was out at Randwick Juniors Rugby watching the boys train, and I thought that was fantastic, because as you said at the start of the show, I went out to Hills Rugby, my mate Nev and his kids play out there, and Israel Folau was there. David Lolohea was a champion. All the kids ran around Israel Folau, and David Lolohea was still there, you know, helping out, doing his best, and, you know, standing in the sort of reflected glory of Israel. But David was a great guy. But it was great to see Checker out there. It was great to see the Tars out there, and I want to see more of that. You know, what do we pay these guys? They should do that every week. Another
comment. Good luck looking after 2 chat rooms. Yes. Thanks very much. It's going to be a nightmare. But you know what? There's a strong community on YouTube as well. So it's sort of a little bit different, isn't it, Ben?
Yeah, well, I tell you what I want to do too is starting that blog is I want to start some deeper conversations around some of the great stuff that's raised in our Facebook and YouTube pages. Some really good viewer comments out there. I want to take those and turn them into blogs for serious chat.
And I'll be doing it. We're going to do a 360 version of this show too. That'll be going live on Facebook. It's a 4K camera. It probably goes out in 2K by the end, but we're going to do that as well. So we've got heaps to do.
Are we the world's leading rugby tech podcast?
Greg Parker's just joined the chat room. He said, you can fire up now. I'm watching. Mate, we're about to end the show. God damn it.
Probably didn't expect us to be on time.
Yeah, all right. Hey, thanks for joining me, mate.
Thanks, mate. Enjoy your trip.
Yeah, thanks. On the road all this week as well before we head out on Sunday to the UK. So a bit of tech and a bit of cricket, but yeah, we'll. But make sure you stay tuned to the website and on Facebook and on YouTube. Ben will have his first column. Make it a decent one. All right.
Right. Might be short, but I'll put one up.
Okay, righto.
But guys, please, you know what I always say. You make me think. You make us think more about the game. Please comment, share, all that kind of stuff. Like it.
All right, thanks, Benny. Thanks for joining us. And
Give us a thumbs up before you go. That's right.
yeah, we want thumbs up. And please share. Like, we love all the thumbs up, but if you share it, it's just going to make it a lot better for us in terms of getting this show hanging around for a lot longer. And if I get a chance in the UK, I might even dart across and see Les.
Yeah, all right.
That'd be awesome over in Ireland.
All
I've
right.
got plenty of friends over there in Ireland, so thanks for joining us, mate. All right. Okay, so that is it for RuggaMatrix International. Also, can I just say thanks to the guys at Bridge who have just updated my iPad Pro with a new keyboard. The Australian company who make unbelievable keyboards for tablets. The boys at Bridge, big rugby fellas. So thanks to the boys at Bridge, good Australian tech company. That is it for RuggaMatrix International this week, episode 239. As I say every week, enjoy your rugby.
The heat is still on.
Massive game.
New Zealand to win.
Great kick.
It's been a terrible year for the Wallabies.
You're missing an injection of light.
Stupid guys think they're so good.